Hello and welcome to Gin with Gwynne. I'm Oliver Gwynne, and this is where I give my off-the-cuff and unrehearsed thoughts on marketing, data, and philosophy. This week, what is agentic? I try and explain. So the problem with agentic is that a lot of people are going to start talking about it, and I want to make a few things really clear to begin with. The first is that I saw an interview with one of the founders of Claude who says he thinks in the world of billions of people, there's only maybe 500,000 people who are actually building proper agents today, which is not a lot of people. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, we've not done anything with agentic, or we've not really done anything with agents, then don't worry. I don't think you're behind the curve. I think that's probably normal at this point. The second thing is a lot of people are claiming that they are making agents, and I have seen several cases where that's just not true. I used to work for a company that did RPA. RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation. That's right, robots doing stuff. And they make RPA by copying literally screen recording in a way. What your mouse does on the screen, you can feed that to a robot. It can then do if-then decisions. If this has happened, then do this. And you can automate entire processes just by doing that. Needed a burp. And particularly in finance and order to cash, that's very common. And that's robots doing things, but it's not necessarily agentic. It's rules-based automation. It actually invented in the 1980s. But when agentic first was talked about, I saw a lot of companies that were selling agentic, but really I could tell it was RPA. In some cases, I could tell which RPA thing it was. And so we have this very confusing term agentic, and I wanted to break down a few different terms in the AI space. What do they really mean? What is agentic and how does it work? First is, what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is a way to get money out of investors. Artificial intelligence is an umbrella term covering everything from basic rule that flags a customer if they've not been active for 30 days to the most advanced reasoning system available today. Both of those things are technically AI. And so a lot of people are going into that grey, murky area, even though to a lot of us, AI means a very specific thing. They're saying they have AI in their product or their service, or they're using AI, but there's scales of AI available. So the first thing to think about is machine learning, or ML. So machine learning is a specific subset of AI. It's systems that learn patterns from historical data rather than following the rules that a person wrote by hand. And that's the mechanism behind a lot of predictive analytics. So looking at past behavior to predict the future, things like churn, propensity to spend, propensity to convert. Next, you're probably familiar with large language models. So LLMs, they're a particular type of machine learning model, and they're trained on enormous amounts of text. And it's very good at a specific thing, which is understanding and generating language. So if you asked a large language model to write one email once, when a human explicitly prompts it to, it's a perfectly useful tool, but it is not necessarily an agent or an agentic, because agentic is a system. It's not the property of a model. It is a property of the system built around it. So an agentic system takes a goal, reasons about how to achieve it, takes an action, and then checks the results and adjusts, largely without a human specifying every individual step along the way, which is what makes it so scary and so sexy at the same time. The model underneath it, there's lots of models that might be feeding the agentic model so that it can do its job with more reasoning. And that's why building up to agentic is really, really important, because it's not going to be a one-off piece of software that you need to buy. It's going to be a system that you build over time. So how does agentic actually work? It sounds like magic to most people, but under the hood, it's doing a few things. The first thing is it's a loop. It's not a brain. The simplest way to describe an agent is that it has those 4 repeating parts: observe, reason, act, and check. It looks at the current situation and works out what it's actually being asked to do. It figures out what does a good response look like, and then it does something, either producing an output, using a tool, and then it checks whether that action actually works before deciding what happens next. And the loop is the whole trick with agentic. There's no hidden layer of judgment behind it. What makes an agent look intelligent is simply that the loop can run like several times in a sequence, each pass informed by the one that the last one produced. So rather than a single fixed step firing once, it reasons in language, which is why we can read its thinking, which is what makes it really cool. And I think that surprises a lot of people as well. So a modern agent, it's not sort of reasoning with some internal code. It reasons in like plain sentences, the same kind that you would write, basically, where you're working out step by step what to act and what to do. And you can see those when you're doing like Claude, ChatGPT, it says doing this, doing this, doing this, doing this, and you can see its reasoning. And you're like, oh, you can sometimes go, oh, you've gone wrong there, or no, that's not what I'm asking, and all that kind of thing. And that's a large important part of like why agentic is important, because it's inspectable in a way that earlier automation never once. If you built a whole automation system, you had to know how that particular thing was built to understand how to improve it, or you had to be the one that built it to improve it. But you're not just seeing the output, you can see the reasoning that produced it and check whether that reasoning actually holds up. It acts through tools, but only through tools that you specifically have given it. So an agent cannot reach outside of what it's being given access to. Every action it takes, sending a message, looking something up, updating a record, happens through a specific name tool that a person has deliberately connected. This matters much more than it sounds, because it means that the full range of what an agent could possibly do is a known finite list somebody has chosen, not an open-ended capability that might do anything. If it was never given a tool to do something, it cannot do that thing no matter what situation unfolds. It checks its own work because it was told to. So the checking step is not like emergent instinct. It's not like us where we're like, oh, I'm really tired, I should check what I've written. It happens because the system is built to pause, look at what has been produced, compare it against a standard, a rule, a guideline, a threshold, before treating the job as done. If you remove that step and you get exactly what the ungoverned behavior people worry about, you get like unmoderated thoughts, you get facts that are not there, you get hallucinations. So it's really important that you think about guide rails, you think about what good looks like and the instructions when you're building your agentic system, because otherwise it will behave like a black box and not like sort of a junior colleague, which is what we're hoping it will become. It still needs a person in the loop. So none of this makes an agent infallible, and treating it this way is a real risk. So the loop is only as good as what it's told counts as good. And it's a new situation, one nobody anticipated when the rules were written, is exactly where an agent should hand off to a person instead of confidently guessing. If you have edge cases, and we all have edge cases, that's where you need to make sure that humans are in the loop. A well-built system knows the edge of what it was told, and it stops there, and there's a handoff point. And that handoff point, more than anything else, is what separates an agent that you can trust versus something that simply looks impressive until it's not. Is this going to replace people? Is obviously the hot topic question. I think no. I think, again, coming back to RPA, it's a technology that's existed since the 1980s to do large-scale automation, and there's still people being employed in finance, even though finance is generally where it's employed. It's not new technology, it's 40 years old now or whatever. And so I don't think that agentic will replace people. You still need to design the system itself. You still need to have the strategy behind it. An agent is only as good as the loop it's given, the tools it's allowed to use, and the judgment somebody else has written for it to check. And each one of those has to come from a person who understands the job well enough to encode it. And every genuinely new situation still gets handed back to a human by design. So the role is not, your roles are not going to disappear. It's just that you're more likely, if you're automating a CRM, for example, you're more likely to deal with edge cases. You've got more time to deal with people who are high spenders, this kind of thing. I know that there is a lot of worry about agentic. and about AI in general. It can do so many things so quickly, and there's no way we can speed up. And Elon Musk is saying, well, it will produce so much so quickly that the economy will just flow and there'll be an endless money because we'll be transferring it between us, and then we can have some sort of universal credit. I don't think that's going to happen necessarily, but certainly I can see a place where we speed up production thanks to agentic systems. The next thing you might be wondering is, cool, that all sounds amazing, Oliver, but like, how do we get there? Well, it's a journey. It's not a piece of software. It's not something that's going to be 3 to 6 months. I've seen like people ask, I've had inquiries where people are like, oh, can we like use AI to replace 2 people, 3 people, this kind of stuff to run their business practically. And they don't want to spend money on it. And I'm like, if this is replacing 3 people, you should at least think about your budget in terms of like 3 people's salary full time for 1 year. You know, it's crazy to me, honestly. So the first step is really the most important, which is centralizing your data. You cannot ask an agent to do something intelligent with information that it cannot see. And right now, most people have data in silos, and they have unstructured data, and they have messy data if they have data in one place. So centralizing is not about putting all of your data in one place. It's really about understanding and defining through a manual process, unfortunately, what are the metrics that are important to me that will affect decisions that the agent will later come to rely on. And so spending the time in the boardroom thrashing out what does LTV really mean, lifetime value, is more important than it's ever been before. The next thing to think about is that, okay, you've got models at that point. You've got a basic model that might tell you things like, this is what LTV is, this is what profit is, this is what EBITDA is, all of these kind of things. That's your baseline for agentic. And then the next step in front of that is what we were talking about earlier. It's predictive analytics. It's using those signals and combining them, looking at past data and starting to think about, well, what does all of this information mean? Churn propensity, upsell and expansion propensity, lifetime value prediction, next best action, reaction propensity, engagement decay, contact propensity, price elasticity, all of these more complicated questions. You've got your baseline, and then those can feed into these more complicated questions that often require machine learning. And then the machine begins to know more things. It begins to know that, okay, the chances of this happening are this. And so it gets to be more and more intelligent. And then with that layer in, it can act. So at that point, it's got input sources. It has the sources centralized, and it can begin to act on its own because it has a wider context that you have checked against the source of truth. You've created it purposefully by thinking about the strategy of what's important to you and your business, and then it can go and do things. And typically what it's going to do is low-level admin things at scale that a person couldn't do. And so an agent reasoning brilliantly over incomplete data does not produce a good decision. It produces a confident decision that is wrong. And the confidence is what makes bad agents basically dangerous. The next thing is that the prompt for your agent, or whatever you want to design an agent for, is really, really important. I'm sure we've all realized that we have to be more specific in what we ask AI. If you give it a vague instruction like, write something to win this customer back, it's got to guess tone, length, urgency, what counts as acceptable claims, and it'll guess differently every time. A well-built prompt does the opposite. It specifies, brand voice in this case, what the argument agent can't say, give it a clear sense of what good looks like for that particular message and that particular person if you can. And so guardrails, everybody's talking about guardrails at the moment, gets used constantly and rarely gets explained. So in practice, a guardrail is just a specific testable rule that limits what an agent is allowed to do without asking a human first. So it could be, for example, a spend or a discount ceiling above which an offer needs to be signed off. Could be a list of topics or claims the agent must never generate. Could be a confidence threshold below the drafted message does not get sent to somebody. So guardrails are really, really important when we're thinking about agentic CRM. And what can you build? You could build things like drafting agents for drafting your emails, compliance agents for checking if conversations are compliance, routing agents, what's the best time to send this parcel, by what delivery, and all that kind of stuff. Scheduling agents, what's the best time to post this? Escalation agents, what does need to be sent to a human versus what can be done automatically. And I think agentic, when we get into it, it will become a sequencing problem. One of the questions I think people will start to ask is, well, do I need to design all of this from the start? Do I need to go, okay, I'm going to need 5 agents and they're going to do this and this one's going to hand off to this one and all this kind of thing? Because agentic, again, it's a system. And they're going to pay a lot of consultants. People saying consultancy is dead, but they'll pay a lot of consultants to figure out those things for them. But I don't think that you need that plan to begin with. And I think trying to figure all those things out is a really good way for your agentic project to stall before you've done anything. Because there's a real tension there, because picking one thing that seems to be working, such as better data quality, and then treating it as a whole product without stepping back is dangerous. But also that is a very good place to start. And so it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. So again, coming to horizontal versus vertical, I think you need to understand the starting point and then pick one use case with the clearest, most immediate business impact, prove that agentic can work before adding the next layer. And that means going all the way down. That means getting all the data for that use case. It means doing the predictive model and then serving it up to an agent. And this is a month's game, not a week game at this point in time. And so the whole thing towards agentic is not thinking about technology and how technology works or anything like that. It's about having a conversation. What does the end goal look like? And even what does a perfect world look like? And then stepping back and saying, okay, but reasonably, if I had somebody junior to do this job today, what would they need to know? Okay, what data do they need to make that decision? Where do I find that? And backwards in place. And so agentic, as I say, it's a system, it's a loop that can improve. It needs humans in the loop to adjust and get smarter. Certainly, you don't let your agent loose on a full database or something, or a full CRM on day one. You want to make sure that humans are heavily in the loop so you gain confidence over time. Don't trust vendors and companies when they say that their tool is agentic. It isn't necessarily. A good question on that front is to ask them what happens when it hits a situation that it hadn't been planned for. Don't let different agents blur into this black box that you can't explain. You want to keep their roles pretty separate. So if there's errors, you know exactly where. But you don't need to think about the whole system today. You just need to think about what's the first use case for agentic that would be big impact, but low brain thoughts. As in, you're not going to have to design a very complicated system to get an easy win. And so the first agentic use case might be more expensive than other forms of automation, and that's a consideration. But it might be a good place to start with something simple, prove it works, and then go to the next stage there. I hope this explained what agentic is. I think good agents relate to how deliberately you've built the edges of it. So the guardrails that you were written down before anything shipped, the QA level that catches what a rushed human would have missed anyway, and the escalation path that if you've got difficult use cases, make sure that it's always being sent to a human, because that's really important. So you judge a system by how it behaves at the boundary of what it knows, not how impressive it looks in the middle of doing something routine. Thanks very much for watching, and tune in next week for another Gin with Gwynne.